Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about taking time-lapse photos with a Nikon D7000. I'm basically going to show you how to do it, what settings you need to use, and the cool footage that you get from this setting. So stay tuned. Just a small disclosure for my watchers, this video was made because a subscriber asked for me to show them how to do a time-lapse. Now, in my experience in photography, I have never done a photographic time-lapse, so this is all new to me. So, as you enjoy this video and watch it, I hope you learned something, but just know that this is a very new experience for me and I am learning as well. So, just a small disclosure for all my viewers. Thanks for watching. So right now I got this time-lapse going of this scene, and it's a little bit wider angle with this camera, but basically when you're taking a time-lapse, you have to think about the lighting, the scenery, your foreground, and things that are moving in your time-lapse. When you have, say, a foreground, a background, and anything in the midground that's not really moving, you can't really create the greatest time-lapse because it's just going to make it look like a picture. So you want to make sure that whenever you're doing a time-lapse, you have something that's moving or traveling or something that is going to give it movement. And when you are doing a time-lapse, I would say the best setting to use is the aperture priority mode, especially during the day. Well, I would say only during the day, because when light changes, you need your camera to be able to adjust your exposure automatically. That way you don't have to worry about your exposure. Now, say you're doing a nighttime time lapse, you have to make sure that you put your camera, I'd say, on manual, because you don't have any light to change. So you want to make sure you have the same shutter speed during the whole entire time lapse. That way it doesn't change, and that way you can get your really cool lighting effects with your stars and your star trails or whatever you're doing. But that way you can really make it's easier if you have it on manual. You don't have to worry about your exposure settings and everything like that. So just something to think about when you're doing these. And time lapses can be really fun. It's another way to be creative with your camera and create like this short video, and to really get more into how your camera works. So in this, I'm going to show you on the next thing how to set up a time lapse and what is required. You can either use your built-in what's it called? Intervalometer, or you can also buy an external intervalometer. It's basically where you're taking pictures in intervals, and I'll put a link in the description for intervalometer that I think would work great. You can buy it on Amazon all day long, like $20, I think. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can check those out. If your camera doesn't have an intervalometer, that's what you would get. Or if you'd say you don't like the intervalometer in your camera, you can definitely do a little bit more of custom settings with an external one. So that's something to think about as well. So let me go ahead and show you the settings of how you set this up. It's very simple. You just have to make sure that you have your shutter speed and your timing correctly, because that really ends up being crucial to how your shots are taken and how this whole time lapse comes out. Okay, so let me go ahead and get to that now. Okay, so when you want to start a time lapse, you want to tap the menu button, which we have it on right now. So you just tap the menu button, and then you want to make sure you're on the camera icon right here. And then you also want to go over and you're going to scroll down on the D-pad until you see the interval timer shooting mode. Now tap OK, and you're going to come across two different menu settings. One is to take the time lapse now, or to start the time lapse now, or to pick a current time that you would like, a certain time that you would like to take a time lapse. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the now. Let me go ahead and turn off the one I was doing. So let's go back into it. Okay, so I'm going to now. So basically, what you have here is your hour, your minute, and your seconds. Now, when you're using this mode, you want to make sure that your shutter speed is going to be fast enough. If you have a shutter speed where your mirror is open and you're taking star photos, you want to make sure your interval is higher than the timing of the amount of time that your shutter is open. It's very important, or that basically, if you don't have this set, it won't work. Okay, so that's one thing to consider. During the day, what I like to do is set my interval timing to probably around 7 seconds. That way I have enough time for the picture to, for the mirror to go up and down, and for the picture to process. Now, if you have a high-speed memory card, it probably will process very quickly and render pretty quick, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. The next menu, you're going to hit the D-pad on the right again. This is where you're going to tell the camera how many pictures you want during the interval and how many pictures to take during the interval at that one point in time. So if you raise it to 2, it's going to raise it to 200 shots. If you raise it to 3, it's going to be 300 shots. So, and then the same thing goes here. If you raise it to 200, it's going to be 600 shots. So it all depends on how many you want. For me, I found the best settings to be 1 shot per interval, and try it out for yourself and kind of get a feel for how this works. Okay? I feel that's very important. That way you know, as a photographer, how you want this whole thing to function. Hopefully you guys can see it a little more better. I think it was a little blurry, but so then all you would do is hit on to start your time lapse. Okay? So that's the first method. Now the second method is basically the same. We're going to go back. Okay, so what you would do is just select the start time. So say you wanted to take the picture at 2 a.m., which is when I'm filming this, because during the day I don't have much time because I have a lot of things going on and I have to work. So, but if you want to set it to be a certain time, your little clock is down here. It's going to tell you what time it is, and then up here you're going to set it to what time you want your time lapse to start. So say you have an event that is taking place, like maybe a meteor shower or something, and there's like clouds or something, and maybe it's supposed to get partly cloudy or clear when the forecast says it's supposed to be. You can set your timer to this, or maybe even a sunset shoot, something like that. That's what this is good for. And basically all you do is set your hour, minute, and second again, and then you would of course set your amount of pictures and how many pictures you would like to take. So that's that. Now, one thing to consider is when you're doing this during the day, set your camera to aperture priority. Save yourself the headache and make sure you have your camera adjusting your shutter speed automatically. That way you don't have to worry about that for each shot. Especially, I mean, you can't really change it if your shutter is going too fast, so that, you know, then your time lapse isn't going to work correctly. Now at night, when you are doing a time lapse, say you want to do star photography and you want to make a time lapse, the best way to do it is with manual. Okay, manual, and then you set your bulb or your shutter speed accordingly. But remember, this is where it gets tricky. If you have a shutter speed of 30 seconds, you have to make sure you set this over 30 seconds and give yourself enough time for your camera to process and render that photo on the memory card. So when you're doing your time lapses, keep in mind when you're setting your intervals that you want to think about the time that is actually passing by. Each moment that goes by means you're going to have a different image, especially if you have a lot of movement in your frame. So consider that while you're taking your time lapse. And you would also adjust your white balance and everything accordingly, as if you were going to take a normal picture. Same thing. So everything else is the same. All you have to do is adjust for your time lapse. One thing to also know is that when you are doing this, you want to make sure that your camera is not constantly focusing on the subject with every shot. If it is, you're going to get frames that are inconsistent and they won't look good. And I can show you of an example of that happening later on in this video. And I'll point it out in one of the time lapses, okay? Alright, so here's an example of what happens when you put your camera in autofocus when you're doing a time lapse. The frame goes in and out and you can see the movement in the beginning of the time lapse. It's just really not very great. So don't do that. Just make sure it's on manual mode every time you do a time lapse. So make sure you put either your lens or your camera in manual mode for focusing, and it's usually on the lens, or if you have the motor drive, it's going to be literally in the front of the camera on the side. Okay, it will say A, it will say M, or continuous on some cameras. Okay, but for the D7000, it's on the front left hand side, or you can just use the lens. Either way, it doesn't matter. Okay, so those are things to consider. Alright, so let me go ahead and show you some of the time lapses that I got from this. Alright guys, also another quick note that I forgot, make sure you turn off the VR setting on your lens. That can interfere with this process as well because your lens is constantly making that vibration noise and it is working harder to do what it's supposed to do when you don't need it on a tripod. You always, that's important too. Make sure you have a nice sturdy tripod when you're doing this, okay? That is so important. A sturdy tripod means everything when you're doing a time lapse, so that's also something else. Just trying to think of everything you guys will need for this because they're so cool, and when they do come out, it's amazing. So, all right. It is somewhat a different method of photography, one that can be fairly overlooked when using your Nikon DSLR or any camera that has an intervalometer setting. Time-lapse mode takes photography to a whole new level and creates a stunning visual short video that shows you the compression of time with each frame. Now, time lapses are really cool, and I found them to be really cool with the Nikon D7000. This is the first time I ever really have gotten into time lapses on this camera using just photos. I've used video mode before, but never have done this with photos. So it makes it a little more interesting. Each frame is actually unique, and you can adjust it accordingly. But there's just a batch process inside of Photoshop or it's Photoshop or Lightroom, whichever one you prefer, and you basically just process them all at once in Camera Raw. Right now I'm actually shooting with RAW, not JPEG, because RAW you have the ability to change the color and everything like that inside of the program, whereas when you just shoot JPEGs, you can only adjust one picture at a time, so you're kind of stuck with what you get. So it works better that way. So I highly recommend every time you're doing time lapses that you're shooting with RAW, not JPEG, but RAW. One major other thing that you have to think about that I had forgotten while doing one of my time lapses was that I forgot to blow the dust out of my sensor. And when you do this, you have to just use a air blower that is recommended for DSLRs. That way you can make sure you don't have any dust on your sensor or on your mirror, because that could definitely mess up your image and show up in your picture. Oops, I forgot that. But that is very important, so don't make my mistake, okay? Just something to consider when you're doing this. What else? So timing, aperture, shutter speed, ISO, anything like that. Just make it so that's important. Basically, just like to take one picture per the seconds that I need for my interval, and I do about like 240 pictures, 140 pictures. 140 pictures is short time lapse. If you want longer, you just set it to take more pictures at one point in time. You can see a lot of things happen that you can't typically see. And basically, in a sense, you're making just a real fast-paced movie frame by frame. So it makes it fun. Alright, so we have our file right here. Okay, so here we go. Here is our DCM. These are the pictures that we have of all of our time lapses. Okay, and what we're gonna do, I'm going to show you the whole process of how to do this in Photoshop. Now, there are other programs to use other than Photoshop. All you have to do is look up free time-lapse program on Google, and there will be a whole list of programs that you can try. Honestly, I haven't used any of those because I have Photoshop and I use that, and that works just fine. But if you don't have Photoshop or have the paid subscription for Photoshop or anything like that, there are free programs to do time lapses that won't cost you anything out of pocket. Okay, so I'm going to pick this one right here. Let's see. Actually, this one's a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to just select my time lapse on my memory card. And I'm going to just copy it. And now I want to go put this in another file. Okay, so I have my next file. I'm going to go ahead and paste my pictures in this file. Alright, now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and open Photoshop. Alright, then I'm going to go File, I'm going to go Open, and I'm going to go find my file. Okay, so here's my file with all my pictures for my time lapse, and I'm just gonna go ahead and open all of them in Camera Raw. Okay, so just hit open. Okay, so now that we have our time lapse open, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I select all my images. And I'm going to do an edit process where it changes all of them at once. So see how it does that? Now this picture looks blurry. It's because the sky was moving, and I had my my shutter at 30 seconds. So that's why this looks a little bit blurry. I will clear it up just a little bit. Looks pretty cool. I had my ISO at 400 on this one. I used a 50mm so that I can get the light I needed. Okay, so then once you have your photo sequence edited, you're going to go up to this little convert button up here, and it says convert and save selected images. So I'm going to go ahead and convert them. So then I'm going to go open the file that my other time lapse is in and create a new folder. Okay, go into this new folder, and I want to hit select, and what they're going to be is they're going to be turned into JPEGs. Okay, so then that's selected. I don't care about the document name. I want the max quality, so make sure you select the max quality. Okay, and hit save. And now on the bottom left hand part of the screen, it's going to show that it is saving. So let's just go ahead and quickly get through that real quick. All right. So now that is done, we're going to go ahead and hit cancel. Or if you want to save the selected or if you want to save the edited process that you have, just hit done. So then it saves. Let's go into the file. So then it saves it, and now all of your XMP files are included in your file. So then if you want to go back into it, you can. So then I'm going to go back into, say, Photoshop, and now I want to go into open, and I'm going to file the file that I have. I want to go into the file that I have where my time lapses are. I'm going to click one picture, and then one important detail, I'm going to select image sequence. Okay, so make sure you hit image sequence and open. Now what it's going to do is I have to select my frame rate, so I'm just going to keep it at 24, hit OK. And now I have my time lapse. It's pretty easy. So let me go ahead and play it for you. And right now what it's doing is just rendering. That's the first step of this in Photoshop or anything. It's going to render first. Alright, so now that's my time lapse. That's pretty cool, right? So that's how you do it in Photoshop. And if you guys have any questions about this, please let me know. But that is exactly how you do it in your Photoshop program. Okay? Alright guys, well I hope you liked this video, and I hope you learned how to do a time lapse in this video. Please, if you have any questions, please write me in the comments below. And if you want me to make any more videos about the Nikon D7000, please also comment that in the comments, so then I can go ahead and help you with anything that you want to learn or anything that you might want to do with your Nikon D7000. If you do have questions, concerns, whatever, let me know. Please like and subscribe to my channel, and please share this video if you find it interesting. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you're all doing well. Please take care. Bye.